All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with me. And, well, I guess not just me, right? We have an expert joining us today.
Always a pleasure to be here, ready to dive in.
And today's topic is going to be a little bit spooky, I guess you could say, but really it's fascinating to me. And that's this idea of why horror films seem to have such a tough time at the Oscars, winning those big awards.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, and we actually have some excerpts from a pretty in-depth source here. It's called Horror Films and the Academy Awards, an underappreciated genre. So we're going to be pulling from that a bit today.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that title alone, it kind of gets to the heart of it, right? Underappreciated. I mean, is that really true? Is horror just not Oscar material?
Well, and that's what we're going to try to figure out today, right? Unpack some of that bias against horror, explore why it's seen as less prestigious, and really just kind of see if that perception is accurate.
Yeah, and I think, right off the bat, it's fair to say horror has a certain reputation, right?
Definitely. I think most people, when they think horror, they think, pure entertainment. Maybe not high art, like you'd get with, I don't know, a
Yeah.
sweeping drama or a historical epic.
Right, exactly. It's like popcorn flicks, jump scares, monsters, blood and guts, that kind of
Well,
thing.
look, those things definitely have their place in horror, right? But I think it's a bit of a shallow view of the genre.
Totally. And it's interesting because the Oscars do tend to favor certain types of films.
Yeah.
The ones you mentioned, those prestigious pictures.
Yeah, historically, the Academy has leaned towards films that, have that sort of gravitas. You mentioned the complex characters, the weighty themes, or, sometimes just a really well-crafted period piece, something that feels important.
And so that begs the question, right? Does horror just not fit that bill? Is it inherently less capable of artistic merit than, say, a historical drama?
Well, I'd argue absolutely not. In fact, you could say horror is deeply rooted in storytelling traditions, going way back.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. From ancient myths and legends to folk tales and campfire stories, horror has always been a way for us to explore our fears,
Hmm.
the things that keep us up at night.
Exactly. Our deepest anxieties about death, the unknown, the darkness, these are universal themes, and horror gives us a safe space to confront them in a way.
Right. And like you said, it's not just about cheap thrills.
Yeah.
There's real craft involved in building suspense, creating atmosphere, the psychological tension that keeps you on the edge of your seat. That's an art form in itself.
And let's not forget the visual elements, right? The use of lighting and shadow, special effects makeup, the way horror films can create these truly unforgettable images. Think about the iconic monster designs over the years, or just a really well-executed jump scare.
Oh man, those get me every time. But you're right. There's a real artistry to it. It's not just about, throwing blood on the screen.
Exactly. And I think, a perfect example of how horror can achieve that kind of artistic recognition is The Silence of the Lambs.
Oh yeah, that film swept the Oscars,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Best picture, best director, best actor, best adapted screenplay.
The whole shebang, and it's a horror film, undeniably, but it also blends genres, right? You have elements of thriller, psychological drama, even some police procedural stuff in there.
Right, it's not just a straight up slasher flick. And so does that suggest that for horror to gain recognition, it has to kind of disguise itself as something else?
Yeah.
Like dress up in a tux and pretend to be a fancy drama.
Well, that's a good question. And I think, The Silence of the Lambs is an interesting case study because it did kind of straddle that line.
Yeah, it wasn't afraid to be scary, but it also had these really well-developed characters and a complex plot
Yeah.
that went beyond just the scares.
Exactly. And I think, like, more recently, you've seen films like Get Out, which was undeniably a horror film, but it also had this really powerful social commentary woven into it.
Oh, yeah. That was a huge hit, and it earned some major Oscar nominations, too.
Yeah. It did. And I think that might signal a shift in the Academy's perception. Perhaps they're starting to recognize horror that embraces its genre elements while also tackling these bigger themes.
Right. It's not an either-or situation. You can have a film that's both terrifying and thought-provoking.
And entertaining, too. Let's not forget that.
Oh, absolutely. Horror is meant to be fun, too, right? It's about that adrenaline rush, the catharsis of confronting your fears.
Exactly. So maybe this whole debate isn't so much about horror's artistic merit, but more about evolving perceptions. The way we view the genre is changing.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, what does it say about us as a society that we maybe struggle to acknowledge the art in a genre that forces us to confront our deepest fears and anxieties?
That's a really good point. Maybe we're too quick to dismiss what makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that raises another question, right? Could other genres like action films or comedies be facing similar biases just for different reasons?
Now there's something to think about. Are we too focused on certain types of storytelling at the expense of others? What does that say about the values we place on different forms of art?
Yeah, definitely food for thought. And
Hmm?
you know what? I'd love to hear what you all think out there listening. What other film genres do you think might be unfairly excluded from those prestigious awards and why?
Yeah, let's keep this conversation going. Hit us up on social media. Let us know your thoughts because this is a topic that deserves more attention.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Until next time, happy watching, and don't forget to sleep with the lights on.
Only if you want to.
All right, see you later.
Yeah.